Welcome to episode 45 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with clinical nutritionist and private flight attendant Christina Pistone. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom. Largely from rigid diets and painful body image, but ultimately it's about the freedom to be yourself. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. My friend Christina and I had been internet friends for so long that when we got on this call, it took us a while to realize this was the first time we'd actually spoken, not just by email or Facebook Messenger or one of the groups that we were both part of. And this has been like over 10 years. We had similar journeys that included a lot of unnecessary and harmful fasting, extreme dieting, and doing things that at the time we genuinely thought were good, despite the fact that our bodies were saying otherwise. Christina used to own a colonic and float tank studio in New York with Gil Jacobs, who's been on a previous episode, which will be linked, and she shares with us her experience of living in New York and the toll that took on her body. I do want to say that I get messages or concerns from clients and listeners sometimes as they listen to these episodes because there's a really big variety of things. There's a variety of things that I've found helpful in my own journey and that I'm fascinated with, but they may not be right for where you're at in your journey or right ever, just right for you at all. And what I want to say is if any of these conversations are rubbing you the wrong way, 100% turn it off. There's no need, especially if you're perhaps just finding some grounding and sanity in your body. Or it just may be that some of the things talked about, juicing or colonics, for example, just aren't for you right now. Maybe they will be at some point. Maybe some point they'll be a joyful, interesting part of your journey. But if right now it feels triggering or it feels like, oh, I should be doing that, or it gives you kind of this racy or kind of an annoyed feeling, just no need. If you're just not interested in those topics, but you don't feel triggered, there's a ton of good stuff in here. Lots and lots of fantastic stuff. In fact, what you'll hear in this conversation, Christina and I talk about the dangerous assumption that thinness equals health and how getting compliments on being thin when you're actually sick can really mess with your mind. We'll talk about how sometimes working less hard is what's needed to support your health and well-being. The cycles of thinking about food more than engaging with life and how to use that as a cue that something is off. Feeling like once the diet plan is perfect or the body is perfect, that will be fulfilled, and how very untrue that is. How scary it can be to move from a controlled diet plan or way of living, a very controlled way of living, to a more gentle structure that lets us get in touch with our own intuition, but how very worth it is. And what Christina does to cultivate a sense of home in her body wherever she goes in her many travels. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Christina Pistone. So one thing that we have in common is, well, my history as a flight attendant anyways, and your current life as a flight attendant, which is a very specific kind of life. And you've talked about a period of time being on the road or in the air, as it were, where you were fasting a lot and forcing yourself to go to the hotel gym, even though it didn't feel good. And you've come a long way since then. And we'll talk about all of that. But what was it that got you into the wellness and cleansing world to begin with? And how did it start to turn into something not so supportive of your well-being?
Yeah, so I think when I was 22, I read that book. I don't know if you ever read Skinny Bitch.
Yeah, I totally did. Oh my God, I forgot about that.
The title throws me off. I don't love the title because
I thought it was kind of cheeky.
Right?
Yeah.
But read it, and I remember reading that chapter about what goes on in the slaughterhouses, and I was just appalled because I had no idea back then. And so that made me go vegetarian overnight. And
you were how old? When was this?
I was 22, almost, I think I just turned 23.
Okay.
And I'm almost 34 now. So then, and then that led me to Natalia's work. And that's where you and I connected because I started reading all her books, and those were just game changers for me for sure.
So you weren't into any sort of health pursuit or anything prior to the Skinny Bitch book?
Well, I was a personal trainer and, really the fitness side of things ever since I was really young. So, but when I thought I was healthy, that was eating like brown rice and organic chicken.
Right.
So I mean, maybe that's healthy for some people, but that at the time I was, I didn't know anything about food combining or colonics or any of that. I just worked out, ate what I thought was healthy. And, I always lived a pretty conscious lifestyle, I thought. And then I found this work and it just kind of opened my eyes up to a whole new world.
I think we always think we're conscious, maybe.
Yeah.
Or we think we know what we're doing in the world, and there's always more. There's just always so much more. So when you got into it, was it just like super fresh and fun and exciting? And oh my gosh, look at this way that I can be, less harmful in the world, and I'm feeling so healthy. Like, was it bright and fun, or did it go right into this sort of like obsessive kind of thing?
Well, in the beginning, it was really fun. And the first book I read was the Raw Food Detox Diet
Yeah.
because that's the only one that was really out at the time. And I was so into it and so pumped. And my boyfriend at the time, I remember him like looking at my grocery bill and being like, Christina, this is not sustainable, because I was a 23-year-old young lady. And he was just like, how are you going to pay these kind of bills every month? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'll figure out.
I know. Was that with all the like raw food packaged treats
Yes.
and all the gourmet stuff? Yeah.
Yes, all the gourmet stuff and when you first are buying all the supplies, like all these like agave
Oh
and
yeah, and your
oh
juicer.
my gosh.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was really expensive at first, but I was so happy and it was so fun and I didn't even really have any weight to lose at that time, but I still lost like 5 or 10 pounds just because of the proper food combining and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, that's kind of weird, but I had so much energy and I felt so good. But then you know how Natalia wrote the Detox for Women book afterwards, kind of correcting what wasn't fully addressed in that first book, more geared towards women with, the candida and all that stuff. So I went through a period that was not fun after the high of it. I was detoxing really hard and I was not doing colonics or enemas at the time. And my skin broke out. I got actually really sick for almost a year.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, a lot of people don't know this about me, but Gil was like, said he'd only seen a few people that were like me, like sick, skinny. I lost so much weight, even though I was eating a lot. And it was pretty miserable. But then I finally started doing the colonics and that changed everything. I got better almost immediately. So, but it was a very hard year. And then I did it properly because I just didn't do that whole transition, everything that you're supposed to do, the colonics and the transitioning. I did not do that. And so that's why whenever people approach me and ask about switching over to a healthier lifestyle, it's like you really got to, honor the transition period. And I didn't quite do that. And I paid for it.
Well, and it's interesting how, in general, disconnected we are from our bodies that we can go so long. Because I went certainly also long stretches feeling miserable and thinking like that somehow we're doing a good thing.
Right.
I think because of all of I don't know, there's some really bad ideas about detox and about cleansing and that like, and I think this is true in life too for a lot of people that like you need to suffer to feel good. And so it feels like, well, if I'm suffering, I'm doing it.
Right. And then once it comes to a point where you're like, okay, this has been almost a year now. This is not detox. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I can't hold down food. And I'm like 90 pounds and I was never that little. So it wasn't healthy and I knew it wasn't. And the sad thing is that a lot of girlfriends were being like, oh my gosh, you look so great. What are you doing? I want to do what you do. I'm like, no, this is not healthy. I'm 90 pounds. I should be at least 105. And
Isn't that extraordinary that thinness is automatically assumed to be health and beauty?
yes.
Like
And
you must be so healthy, you're doing so well, you look so good. And that can so mess with your mind if you're not actually in a good place.
totally. I mean, if you look at the magazines and the commercials and everything, that's definitely not supporting our highest good. So there's no wonder where this is coming from. But even today, and you've probably seen some of the posts about, how when I left New York, I lost 20 pounds effortlessly. That is true. But that is not saying, losing weight is the goal. I can get into that if you want to, about the whole New York story, how it's very overstimulating there. And I just, my nervous system was on, overdrive. So that was holding on to weight. And I do believe energetically that's kind of a protection mechanism. So I moved away from Youre, and that just kind of evened itself out when I healed my adrenals and everything. It took work, but everybody wants to know. And I get a lot of messages from women, and there's no shame at all. But it is a little interesting how that's the main question I get. How did you lose that weight? Can you please make that video already? And I still haven't made that video, maybe because I'm a little bit hesitant. I don't want people to get the wrong message.
I know. No, I totally hear you. Like, I will put out a before and after picture every once in a while because it gets so much attention. And every time I'm so cringy, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I can't believe I'm into this, but it gets people looking. And then you can be like, hey, this is what I was actually going through at the time. This is the real story. There's so much more to the picture. It's an attention grabber really more than anything.
Exactly. Because I just posted that before and after picture. I don't think I've ever done that before. And people, that's when the messages really start coming in, and you're like, what did I just do? But it does show the difference. And yes, you can get people's attention by that. But I think you and I are both rooted in a very grounded place right now with our message. And maybe I know I probably wasn't. I didn't have that knowledge 5 years ago. So now I think it's really awesome that we're both able to spread a good, healthy message to other women, because yes, you want to feel good in your body. That's important. But you don't want to strive to be a certain weight because you think you need to be, or you're pressured because you're comparing yourself to others. Like, that's not the point. You want to feel good, but
or you feel also like you're not going to be happy if you don't. Or
exactly. Yeah. Like, when I let go of everything is when everything just started to relax and go to the place it's supposed to, weight wise, health wise, everything. It just, you fell into place, you know?
Same. Oh man. Okay. I have so many questions about that, but I'm going to eke my way back because I had questions along the way. For people who are interested or getting into or well into juicing and food combining and raw foods or anything under like the detox umbrella, but they don't know about the colon cleansing piece, how did your life change specifically? Like the way that you experienced your body change when you got into that piece of the cleansing game?
Yeah, so that was really important for me because, like I said, I was really sick. And I had read about, in the Natalia Rose community, women doing enemas and stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll get around to that someday, maybe. I didn't know how important it was. And I was just like, okay. But because I went pretty much raw vegan overnight when I read a lot of stuff and watched a bunch of YouTube videos and stuff. That's where it really got me. I was eating and drinking a lot of green juice, eating a lot of smoothies and all that stuff. And I just had so much to purge, exit. And my body wasn't able to do that on its own. And I didn't realize what was going on. And of course I went and got, I saw doctors, Western medicine doctors, and nobody could figure out for a year. I got endoscopies, colonoscopies, everything. And no one knew what was wrong. And then I see Gil, and he fixes me right away.
And that's Gil Jacobs, who was on a previous podcast that we'll link. So you got into that, and the symptoms started clearing up, and the stuff started leaving your body as it needed to. Even after that, there was mental and emotional stuff going on. Yeah, like you were fasting quite a lot, perhaps unnecessarily. What had you pushing? What caused you to push? Like, I know you've talked about being on the plane and like you don't digest food so well when you're flying, and I totally understand that. So there would be like fasting during the flights. But like, where did the drive for becoming more and more extreme come from?
That's a really good question. I think at the time I just felt, or I thought I felt good, at least when I healed, when I started doing the colonics and enemas and stuff. And I started thinking I felt really good because I was eating such, high vibrational foods. I was like, wow, I feel amazing. And then I heard about all these people fasting, and I thought, oh, I should fast. And so every Monday for years, I was water fasting, and that's, okay, that's one day a week. But then I would,
though,
right? Then did you ever get into water fasting?
No, I did one. So when I was doing my long juice fasts, the 70 and the 90 days, I did one water fast day because I was just determined to experience it, and it was awful. Like it was just terrible. And I am in no way recommending this to anybody. And I know that you're not either. But yes,
Right.
I have one day.
Okay. So I did that for a long time. And then, I would get into, I don't know where I just did all this research and I thought that it resonated with me. And obviously it was all part of my journey. So I don't regret any of it, but I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. So I was juicing like every 3 days, juice fasting the first 3 days of every month, water fasting every Monday. And yes, I travel for a living. So I would fast until I landed. Granted, at the time, I was flying 20 days a month or so. So that's 20 days of fasting until you land. And sometimes I'm flying late at night. So it was way too much. I was just so in my head about, food doesn't digest so well at that altitude and blah, blah, blah. Yes, that is true. But now, like, if I feel like eating something on a flight, for sure I will. Do I know that I might not feel as good? Okay. But if your body's asking for nourishment, give it nourishment. That's what I'm doing. I'm just intuitive with my body. So I was fasting way too much, and I really do feel like it caused some metabolic damage. And it got to a point where I literally, even if I was just eating cucumbers or something, I was gaining weight. I got in a very bad place with my metabolism because there was just years of fasting too much. And I've heard other people talk about this, and I have to say for myself, like that was real for me. And so when I see women that are on that yo-yo cycle of, I think Gil calls it penthouse to the outhouse. Like you fast, you feel amazing, and then you binge and you mess up, and then you're like, oh my God, I need to fast again. The up and down, up and down, up and down. That really messed up my metabolism for a long time.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you talked about like now you'll listen to your body, you'll eat on a flight if you need to, even if it doesn't feel as good. But do you feel like uh, it seems that we can get kind of a high from not eating? And just because you don't feel as good doesn't necessarily mean that you're not nourishing yourself, would you say?
You mean when you don't eat?
Yeah, like I feel like we can get this kind of buzzy high when we're not eating, particularly when we need to eat. Like, stress is kind of coursing through our bodies. And so I will hear people say, like, maybe they've gotten into a cycle of intermittent fasting, but they're binging at the end of it. So it's clearly not serving them. But they're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I feel so good. I'm fasting all day and I feel good when I'm fasting, but then I binge. And I sort of feel like that's not an authentic feel good. I think that is stress running your body.
Right. It's very temporary and very fleeting. It's not, yeah, I agree. I feel like whatever is grounding for me right now, especially because I'm in the air so much,
Yeah.
that's a priority. So like yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, I was flying and it was a little bit later and I was like, okay, I'm going to finish eating for the day. And then, I'm going to fly for the evening. And then during the flight, I actually wanted to eat something. So I did. And it wasn't that big of a deal. Like I'm not planning on having this huge course because one, I'm working. And two, I don't really have time to do that. But and I know like eating something heavy will, probably affect my work and I have to be on my game. so so there's factors there, but I'm not in my head about it. That's the main thing. So getting out of my head was huge because our minds can be our best friend or our worst enemy. And my mind is my best friend now. And it wasn't before,
How
that's
did you, yeah, what was your process? Like, were you questioning beliefs and realizing that they weren't true, or you just had to wake up and admit, like, oh, I don't feel so well? Like, what was it for you? How did you make your mind your friend?
That is the best question because I haven't completely stopped to think about it. Just earlier today, I was thinking, like, wow, how did I actually get here? And I think
Mm.
it was just such a gradual process. Like, this might sound very woo woo, but like my higher self was just like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
You cannot do this anymore. And I was guided just to be more nourishing to myself in all ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually, everything. And moving away from New York was a big part of it. I love New York and I love my family. They're my friends, but they're like family over there. But it was very bad for my nervous system and just everything. A great experience. And, you know, a lot of people are very addicted to that energy there. And I think it serves its purpose for sure. But once I moved away from New York and I was able to kind of just take a deep breath and, you know, I owned that business with Gil, and as much as the people were so amazing, but I have to say I was around people pretty much at least 12 hours a day that were very into what their next meal was going to be. And wow, you look good today. It looks like you lost some weight. What are you doing? That's all it's just in my aura all day. And it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure. And if you're surrounded by that all day, it's not good for, you know, you're not in a relaxed space to just be like, I feel like just not thinking about food right now. How's that? For, you know?
Yeah.
It was very much centered around food and detox. And I mean, that's what we were doing there. So it makes sense. But I feel like now my life is much more balanced, where it's like, if I want to, you know, I'm trained in colon hydrotherapy, so I administer my own occasionally. And it's like, if I want to treat myself, I will do a colonic. Or if I don't really fast much these days, at all actually. And it just hasn't been calling me. But if I want to eat something, I just eat it. I don't think about it. I don't punish myself. I know what makes me feel good for the most part. And if something doesn't, I don't hold on to it. And I think a meditation practice, yoga, just doing things that actually make me feel good and never forcing myself to do any exercise that feels like torture, you know, just letting go and really just finding your own rhythm. That's what I've been doing. And I just kind of just started to find my own way when I moved back and closed the business, as wonderful as it was. Closing that business and just finding my own way was just the start of this process, but it wasn't overnight. That's for sure.
Sure. I think that's one of the scariest things. And that's what I hear a lot from women. Like, how did you just let go? Like when I talk about letting go of perfectionism, moving more towards intuition, when you're in a certain place, that feels like the scariest thing in the world, because that control feels like what is keeping you sane.
That's so true. That is so true. And the control is actually what's keeping you in a place that isn't serving you. But we've all been there, right? I mean, at least I think you and I both have. And I was thinking, like, you know, if somebody told me exactly what to do a few years ago, or I read a book, would I have just been able to switch over? I don't think so. I think this process had to work itself out the way it did. And maybe it took a few years and people don't want to do that. You know, that sounds like forever. But, you know, it's been kind of, I don't want to say a roller coaster, but I'm so grateful for the work that you and I have both been exposed to, because it was life-changing for me. I can't really imagine where I would be if I never even found this whole detox world. But I think tailoring it to your own specific needs and just who you are and your lifestyle and everything, that's important, because every body is different. That's true.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. Like, I don't know where I would be. I say this all the time if I hadn't found this work. And it's not for everybody. And it's not like, this is not a promo for juice and colonics. It's really a promo for self-love and self-trust and honoring intuition. But I was just thinking about, in regards to, I think a lot of us have gone down the orthorexic rabbit hole. And that's exactly what somebody said today in the detox group on Facebook. Like, oh, I think we've all gone down a bit of that. And I think for the most part, those of us that kind of started out on this journey together, we've been down and have found our way back to ourselves, really. I was going to say back up into the light, but essentially just back home to ourselves, or perhaps home to ourselves for the first time.
Exactly. Yes, I feel that for sure in my whole being. And I think we had to go where we went in order to be where we are now, even though it wasn't pretty all the time. And I look back and I'm like, I really used to do that or eat that or what?
Yeah, I think that you have to, I think that's life. You have to explore what doesn't work to find out what does work. It's why I'm such a big proponent of slowing down with emotional eating, slowing down with binge eating, like figuring out why you're actually there, what needs you're actually meeting, not trying to get rid of anything, but seeing why you're there in the first place so that we can learn from things. Because I definitely went through a big phase, I don't know about you, where I was like, oh, I'm so mad and diet culture is terrible and the media is terrible and everything's awful. I'm so angry. I wish I never would have done any of this. But then I got a little bit more hindsight and I realized how much I had learned on that whole journey. And I wouldn't change a thing at this point. None of it. The binge eating, the orthorexia, the juice fast, like none of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't change anything either at all. And I think, and it also allows a lot of room to help others, you know, people who are willing or coming to you for help. I'm not one to just preach and start telling people ever what to do. But if somebody comes to me wanting help or advice, then yes, like I'm here,
Yeah.
you know, to support and hopefully send that right message. Like, no, losing 20 pounds is not the point. It's not doing exercise that you hate, not, you know, forcing yourself to juice fast all the freaking time. Like if I'm ever sick or something, sure. And I literally can't stomach food, which I rarely ever get sick, to be honest. But, you know, it's like if I'm really feeling that, then I'm just listening to my body and I won't eat. But that's rare, very rare these days. So it's like really just finding that space where food is fuel to get you through your day. And when you're passionate about life, you're not really waking up thinking about what you're going to eat that day. You're waking up like, wow, I am alive again. And how can I serve? You know, like, what can I do to make this an amazing day? Like, I'm breathing, my heart is beating. It's a gift. And I think being in that state of gratitude is huge. And really it puts you in a space to, and we hear this all the time, like eat to live rather than live to eat. And there was a place in my life where I was living to eat. I was just thinking about what vegan meal I'm making next and all these crazy juices I was going to stock the fridge with. And that was my life. And it was, again, served its purpose. But in that stage in my life, I think, what was missing? Like, was I lonely at that time? What was I missing? Was I lacking love? Was I lacking self-love? Like, what was going on? Because I wasn't fully aligned with my soul and my purpose. And when you wake up just psyched to be alive and you're nice to people and, you know, you're compassionate, you're not really freaking out about what your next meal is going to be, as long as you know you're going to have one at some point. You know what I mean?
Totally. And I think that that's maybe what's hard. If we're in a place where we don't like our life or we don't like ourselves, then it's really hard to let go of the obsessive food planning or the emotional eating, like on either side of it, because that's sort of, it can be what keeps you going.
Yeah. Or the control, feeling like you're
Yeah.
not out of control of your
Yes,
life.
exactly.
That's what
And
I was
think
doing
that,
for sure.
yeah. And all of those things that you can look back on and say, was I looking for this? Was I looking for that? Did you feel like the juice fasting and the colonics and all of this stuff would like get you there? Like once I'm totally healthy and healed and cleansed, then I will feel somehow fulfilled?
I thought that, but I never got there.
Yeah, exactly.
There. I'm still waiting. Now I'm there, but not with all that stuff, you know, like that point never came. And it's crazy because the juice fasting actually kind of turned on me in a way, because I was doing it for, I mean, if I had gotten very sick, very ill, or God forbid, that is something a really amazing tool. I think that can work. It has its purposes for sure. And I am not dissing fasting overall, but I mean, for weight loss, not a good tool. I don't think. Not a permanent, healthy, you know, a tool that's grounded in truth. Like if you're just looking to lose weight, there's ways. I mean, intermittent fasting, that's been popular for a few years, but I think you and I have probably kind of been doing that just naturally for like a decade.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to eat all day, every day. That doesn't feel good to me. So I do have long, you know, I like to finish my dinners really early. and then I don't eat till later on.
Early eater too. All these people eating dinner at like 8, 9, 10 p.m. I'm like, I'd be happy to eat at 3 and like call it a day.
I do that. And people think
my
I'm crazy.
Whole life.
Yeah. People think I'm nuts sometimes. Like sometimes I finish it between like 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And people are like,
I'm so happy that way. And that's not a control thing. That's a, like, I get really hungry, but then like, I don't think about food. I'm good.
Exactly. Well, like I will not be hungry at all for the rest of the day, but rewind 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I would be trying to probably force finishing at this time and then be hungry and then maybe eat something and then feel crappy about it. Like it was forced. Now it's just natural and it feels good. And how did I get here? I honestly don't really know.
Isn't that funny?
It was a long but well worth it process.
Yeah, I think that's why people are so scared to take this like inside out path, because if you take it on paper, you're like, okay, my journey's going to look like this. I'll get here by this time. And it feels so secure. When you actually drop into your body and you're like, okay, what feels good? What feels nourishing? What grounds me? What actually serves me? You don't know what the journey's going to look like. And there's not going to be a final destination. You keep exploring and you keep discovering, but it's, you have to let go a little.
Yeah. The unfamiliar can be very uncomfortable and daunting to many. But if you know it's serving your highest good, it's well worth the trip and well worth the adventure, And yeah, I think what it really comes down to is just listening to your body. I know you're huge on that. And a lot of people don't really know how, or they haven't mastered that yet. I get that. So it takes some time and it takes some practice, but you can start with the little things like, okay, I hate the elliptical. Why am I forcing myself to go do that after a 14-hour work day? And now I'm in somewhere else in the world traveling and I'm making myself do this when I have to wake up. No, don't do it. Just go to bed, get some rest, that's an easy way to start. If you're doing anything that doesn't feel good, that's a signal.
Yeah, I think we overcomplicate like this intuitive eating as if it's some esoteric thing, or this intuitive living. Like, what feels good? What feels good in the body? And I think that maybe we think we're doing what feels good because when we do what it says on paper, like I'm following the diet plan or I'm burning this many calories or whatever, then I get this sort of high because I feel good because of the control piece again. But like in your body, does it feel good? Do you enjoy being here, doing this thing?
Yeah, because we know how powerful the mind is. It's so powerful. So if we can be friends with that side of us, your whole world will change. And if you're feeling good with your routine and what you're doing, and maybe let's say you don't love your job. Okay. Like mine can be very stressful at times. And sometimes I'm waking up at 2:30 in the morning for work. Like that's crazy. But you can't change everything overnight. Like I'm not just going to quit my job and be like, forget it. I'm not going to fly according to other people's schedules. Like I need to, pay my bills. It's kind of important. So you can still work with that and say, like, I tell myself, like, I'm choosing to do this. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do anything. I'm choosing to do this. I'm choosing to go to work today. I am choosing to eat this today, or I'm choosing not to exercise today. Like everything we do, we're choosing and being at peace with that.
Absolutely.
Huge.
Yeah,
huge.
I'm so glad that you said that because I will hear people say often like, well, I'm in a job I hate, just to use that really specific example. So I just can't stop this overeating thing, or I can't stop the control piece because I'm in a job I hate. And they'll stay in this cycle. And it's like, you don't have to change everything all at once, totally radically uproot your life all in one fell swoop in order to soften, in order to let go of the control. It's tiny shifts. I mean, like you said, even if it's the tiny shift of like, okay, if I'm going to choose to be here, I'm going to choose to be here.
Yeah. And make the best of it. And just, I mean, for me now, it's like, okay, I am alive. Not everybody gets that opportunity to wake up every day. You know what I mean? So we're one of the lucky ones. We're here today. That's pretty huge. If you look at it like at a deep level, and you're so on point with that, like with people that are very, and I was there 4 or 5 years ago when I was really trying to control my diet. Was my work schedule was so out of control. Now I have much more control over it. But it was very stressful. and I was always on an airplane pretty much. I was maybe home 5 days a month, like every single month for years. And that was hard because I like to be grounded at home sometimes and, like cook for myself and all that stuff, but it wasn't possible. So, making some adjustments, and just doesn't mean you have to just settle and be complacent and be like, oh, well, this is just going to be my life forever, so I might as well make the best of it. No, like still have the intention and know that you're worth it and know that you can have your best life and make tiny steps towards that. But like you said, you can't just expect it all to change overnight, and it shouldn't be an excuse to just be like, well, then I'm just going to eat myself into a mess. Like,
yeah, I think there's a tendency to think it's either or. Like, well, if I can't just have my dream life and make everything the way that I want it to be, then, well, I can't do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because I would still be in that space if I thought that way, because my schedule was crazy and I had a very particular diet, and even now people will say like, wow, you're so disciplined. And I'm like, not at all, actually. Yeah. Not at all. Like, I don't feel strict or disciplined with anything that I do. I honestly just do what feels good. And that's it. Like, the thought of eating like fast food does not appeal to me at all. So that's not me being strict to say like, ooh, you can't have that. Like, I really actually don't want that. So it's, yeah. And, like I have a lot of really amazing friends who've been vegan for not too long. And they are, how do I say it? Very strict with it. And I'm like, okay, I think you'll loosen up over the years, just with other, like the judgments around people who aren't or whatever. And it's like, everyone's so their own person, and you can never force anyone to do anything. Like, you can just do what feels good for you and just set a good example, be a good person. And that's all you can do, So yeah, I've been around this for quite a while now, and I just find myself in such a accepting and open space. Like, you're vegan? Cool. You're not? Cool. Like, do you love yourself? Do you love other people? Like, I want to hang out with people that are good to other humans, and just, that's really raising the vibration. Maybe, yes, what you eat will do that for sure, but also just like where you are in your heart. That's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, spending a lot of time around Gil Jacobs he was the ultimate. Like, we spent maybe 14 hours a day together for years and his vibration was so high all the freaking time. And he worked all day, and it was just a breath of fresh air. It's like, like, that is possible. And again, is that his ideal situation to work that long every day? Probably not, but he made the best of it. And, like, just being around people like that is really nice and makes life worthwhile. It's like, I promise you, there's so much more to life than food. And I didn't think that at one point, because I was so busy with planning meals and fasting or whatever I was doing. But yeah, life can be a really beautiful adventure, and food is great. It helps us, gives us energy to move through the world. But I think putting a lot of focus on it is, it just kind of like helps you zoom in and think like, what's missing in my life? Like, why am I making this such a focus?
Yes, exactly. And I love that you used the word adventure a moment ago, because that brings me back to what you do, which a lot of people would look at and say, oh man, what an adventure, which really it is. Like, I remember being a flight attendant, and there are some really long days, and sometimes it's really awful and it's really hard. But then it really does feel like such an adventure, and it's like, oh my God, I get to do this. This is crazy. And one of the reasons it's so important to me to take care of my body is that it is my home. And I started to get that sense when I was a flight attendant, like, oh, I take me everywhere, this body, this mind. And if these are well cared for, I can feel a sense of home in a lot of different places and circumstances. So what has your experience been with that? And what are some of the things that you do? I know you mentioned yoga and such earlier, but what's kind of the laundry list of things that Christina needs to give her a sense of home in her body? That was a weird way that I ended up phrasing that.
No, I totally get what you're saying. That's a good question, because when I am actually at my own home, it's like my sanctuary. Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm very Cancer moon, like comfort. And so when I'm home, it's great. It's like I ground here and I love it. But when I'm on the road, I definitely, well, one, sleep. That's huge, because I did not sleep for many years. I mean, I slept maybe 2-3 hours at night. And that took its toll real quick.
Yeah, I bet.
But sleeping is so important. So I make that a priority to just try as much as I can. You know, sometimes I'm flying overnight and I can't sleep and I'm up for 26 hours straight, which is not fun, but it doesn't happen all that much anymore, which is great. But I feel like when I get to wherever I am, like I always have a really great book with me. Right now I'm reading a book by Marissa Peer, who is spectacular. I don't know if you've heard of her.
What is the book? I haven't.
It's called #I am enough. That's her whole movement is I am enough. I really respect her work. She's an amazing psychotherapist, hypnotherapist. Yeah, highly recommend. So I always have a really great book with me, and that makes me feel nice. Like when I'm in bed and I'm about to read, and you know, I always bring like snacks with me just because I fly on private jets and I can like stock the fridge with all of my stuff and my clients. So I always make room for my stuff. And I bring like, you know, a juice for the next morning. I still drink my green juice every day because that feels good. If I can, every day. If not, it's okay. But, you know, I have like my little teas and stuff that makes me feel comfortable, and maybe like a lavender essential oil. And I stretch every morning before bed if I can. And in the, or every night before bed and in the mornings when I wake up, just so my body feels, you know, kind of cared for. If I'm just taking care of people on the plane all night or all day, like I need to take care of myself once we land and I'm in my hotel room. So making that a priority, because I do all the catering and the cooking and everything. So I'm out shopping and doing all this stuff, but I have to carve out some time for me, whether it's stretching, reading, listening to a nice podcast when I'm in bed or whatever, and making myself some tea, like just taking care of me. I have to do that, because we all know, we hear that all the time. You can't take care of anybody else unless you take care of yourself. That is true.
You hear it all the time, but yet I still feel like it's so common to push and push and push and push and forget to take care of yourself, and forget that like you can't keep taking care of other people if you don't take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I did that for many years and I burned out for sure. And I work with I have some really amazing clients and I have some very demanding clients. So it's not an easy job and it's not an easy schedule. It's very time consuming at times, but again, I'm choosing to do that and I'm grateful for the experience and I make the best of it. But I think I can't remember the last time I went into a hotel gym. I think it's been years because I realized how much I didn't like it. So I was like, this is ending now. I'm not doing this anymore to myself. But if you like it and you feel like you get those endorphins,
like
do it. Please.
Yes.
Do it for both of us. But I don't feel
totally. Like I want to say that about anything that's said on the podcast, anything that anybody says, like this is great or this is terrible or I hate this, or if you like it, that is for you.
Exactly.
And
like I am not knocking it for anyone else but me. Yeah, it just doesn't do it for me anymore. I'd rather just stretch in my room or do some yoga or something. Or if I'm in New York, I'll take like a yoga class or a boxing class or something that I like, you know, that I'm familiar with. But otherwise I save like my real, I don't even like to say like workouts, but I guess workouts for when I'm home, because you know, I've worked with this boxing trainer for like 15 years. So I like to work out with him and, you know, I'll do that. But sometimes, I mean, I'm only working out maybe once a week if I have a crazy busy week, and other times maybe 4. And that's okay. You just roll with it. It's the stress that we put on ourselves that really like makes us hold on to excess weight or break out. I mean, stress is a killer. We hear that all the time and it's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to women all the time who are like, if I could just get this one thing in my diet and I could just get this, like the weight would come off. I know it. If I could just stop overeating, or if I could just stop eating so late at night. And I'm like, have you thought about the fact that you are like stressed out of your mind? And that's
right.
It's always it. It's never the late night overeating. In fact, that's usually an effect of the stress anyways. But yeah, no, the stress piece is massive.
Yeah. I mean, you can feel just the tension in those statements alone.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I have stress management dialed in 100%.
Yeah, no,
I'm working on it for sure. It's like my top priority right now. But, and I think I'm actually doing a pretty good job because everything is not in its perfect place, but I'm feeling like in surrender mode, like, well, give it to God because everything will be okay.
Stress management, I think it's just like taking stress as I think it's like stress is a messenger. Stress is saying, you know, there's you're pushing too hard here, or you're believing something that's not true about yourself, or like a whole myriad of things. And if we're not getting the messages, there's only so much managing you can do. And I think you're just getting the messages.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say that I wish I could say I meditate like 20 minutes every morning, 20 minutes every night. I don't. I would love to, but I do think that connecting or getting quiet is huge. Whether you're doing that for 5 minutes in the morning when you wake up and you're laying in bed instead of reaching for your phone, that's really important because it sets the whole tone for your day. And even if you have to set your alarm 5 minutes earlier, it will change your day. You know what I mean? So that's important. And I think that's how I get messages. It's like, you know, somebody will ask like, oh, did you meditate today? Like, did you sit down for 20 minutes, you know, in lotus position? It's like, no, but I try to operate in a meditative state as much as possible when I'm like chopping vegetables for my salad. Like I try to quiet the mind as much as possible because that monkey mind will get us in big trouble.
Well, and I think it's an important point that you made about just 5 minutes in the morning, because we're not going to get the messages if there's no stillness. Like messages come in stillness. If you're like push, 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 go, 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 you're not going to get any of the messages of stress or emotional eating or any of this stuff. So I'm really
about that. And if 20 minutes is daunting and you're just not going to do it ever, then throw that out the window and start with 5 because that's doable, you know?
Yeah, the pressure that we put on ourselves for this ideal, like if I can't do this, I'm going to do nothing. And I think this has come up earlier in the conversation in a different context. It doesn't have to be that. Like there can be an ease. There should be a steadiness and a commitment, but there can be an ease to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, commitment or rituals, those are all really important, but having some flexibility and having ease with it and knowing that you're choosing to do it because it's going to make you a happier person. That's huge. And it'll feel enjoyable. You know, it's not going to feel like a chore or like homework. So finding that in ease in life in general is really important. I've realized that because all the tension and the resistance, that didn't get me where I needed to go ever.
Absolutely. And I think that it's just the life that you live, the fact that you can live it, and that you're so obviously becoming healthier in both your body and your mind as you live it, really shows that you've gone inward. Like you're doing the real work, not the forced on paper it looks good work. So one last question for you. This is a question that I ask everybody. So Free Spirit Academy podcast. I define a free spirit as you when you get to be totally yourself, me when I get to be totally myself, and allowing for that to evolve. When you hear the term free spirit, what comes to mind for you?
That's a good question. When I hear free spirit, I think of being connected to your soul, your purpose, your passion, and connecting with like-minded individuals, you know, like your tribe. That's huge for me, especially lately. Like that has made life so colorful and worth living, being around those types of people that are on a similar vibration and being connected to your passion and your purpose. And just loving being alive. That's a free spirit. Like knowing that you are happy to be here and you're here for a reason, and really reminding yourself and living that every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you.
It's a pleasure, Christina. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. For more on food and body freedom, get my free ebook, The Eat to Feel Good Diet, by signing up for newsletter updates at freespirit-academy.com. I will be back with you next week.